Rainbow Reflections, Book 2, Put Out the Fire. Chapter 15, Cold Inside. No more poisonous mushrooms showed up as time went on. Sorella had certainly been keeping an eye out for anything odd, her nightmares with Mimita worsening as she feared the woman entering the academy to poison her with the plant. She found herself training harder than before, and she would have forgotten to do her homework for other classes if Ren didn't remind her. December 14th arrived with finals for the second years, and Sorella had not studied once. She didn't care about finals, her anxious mind only focused on Mimita when she wasn't so absorbed in martial arts or hanging out with Ren. The school was covered in heaps of white. Snow flew chaotically in all directions, the students barely able to cross the courtyard. Sorella, Ren, and Zin left early from the eating hall after breakfast to make it to the Magic Studies classroom on time, knowing the blizzard could hold them back. Each of them were wearing thick robes, fuzzy hats, and warm scarves. "I hope this test goes better than all the rest," Zin muttered as they entered the room.
"What?"
Ren asked loudly, the wind wailing as Sorella struggled to close the door.
"I said I hope this test goes better than the rest of the tests I took yesterday,"
Zin yowled. Ren winced.
"You don't have to scream."
Zin rolled their eyes. "At least it's your last test until martial arts," Sorella pointed out, slumping down in her seat at the front of the room.
"True,"
Zin said, sitting down as well. Ren leaned against her desk.
"You'll do great, Zin. It'll be a written test after all."
Zin sighed and ran their finger over their desk. They didn't say anything, clearly lost in thought. Zin's magic had barely made an appearance for magic channeling the previous day. Luckily, they had to make it through an obstacle course made by a different student rather than create one themselves. Cherry had been their partner, and Zin managed to put her fires out each time, but did not actually light any fires or move the fire themselves. Their magic did not seem to show up in plants or potions, though their potions enchantments still worked better than most of their classmates. "I wonder if they're going to stop taking school again like last year," Sorella thought, gazing absently at her desk. The bell soon rang, the rest of the second years entering the room. The temperature dropped significantly, the door barely closing before the next student showed up. Eventually, Khurshid and Hyaktu arrived, Khurshid holding the door open for a long moment as Hyaktu walked in, carrying a large box that he could hardly see over.
"I hope you're all ready for your finals today,"
Khurshid said, the bell ringing and drowning out his last words.
"Due to the weather conditions, you'll be taking both the Magic Studies and Magic Channeling finals in this classroom. For plants and potions, you will simply head over to the potions room rather than go all the way to the greenhouse."
Sorella sighed in relief. No chance of more mushrooms then, hopefully.
"Any last-minute questions?"
There weren't, so Hyaktu placed the box on the front desk. The teachers pulled out mirrors and passed them to the students. The mirrors were locked on the test, so students weren't able to access the airnet and cheat. Not that there was much information about magic on the airnet anyhow.
"Just like last year, you'll be taking your test on the mirror, so I can grade them properly,"
Khurshid said.
"When you are done, submit the test and put the mirror on my desk. You may then sit quietly until everyone is finished and it's time for magic channeling."
Sorella looked down at the mirror she had been given. She scrolled through the test and saw that there were 30 multiple-choice questions and 3 written responses. "Ugh, that's so much. I'm too tired for this." "You may begin," Hyaktu declared. Sorella wrote her name in the box at the top of the test, then looked at the first question. What is group channeling? She quickly chose one of the 4 responses, then moved on to the next question and the next. This isn't so hard, she thought, practically flying through the multiple-choice section. She reached the first question for the written responses and realized that's why the multiple-choice questions were so easy. Staring at the test for a long moment, she repeated the question in her head. In what ways do crystals help magic, specifically when doing group channeling? I don't remember any lectures on crystals, Sorella thought. Mr. Jihan brought a crystal to class that one time, but what did he do with it? I don't remember. All I know is crystals make magic more powerful, or something. Or do they help you focus? Ren gave me the crystal on my wand. She said it'd make me more stable, didn't she? Ugh. Sorella was not confident in her responses to the last 3 questions, which took the rest of the class for her to write.
If you still have a mirror, make sure to submit your test before you bring it up,
Khurshid said. She reluctantly submitted her test as the bell rang. Sorella got to her feet and brought her mirror forward, glad that she wasn't the only one to take the whole hour. Zin snuck out of the class after handing in their mirror, done with their magical finals. Lucky, she thought as she sat back down. Everyone get up and move to one side of the room, Hyaktu announced, as Sorella slumped at her desk again. Since we'll be doing magic in here, we'll need some space. Sorella huffed impatiently and got to her feet again, walking over to one wall with the rest of the students. She inched closer to Ren and held her hand, Ren blushing lightly as she smiled up at her girlfriend. Once the students shuffled off to the side, Hyaktu used his air magic to shove the desks and chairs to the opposite wall. Now, most of the classroom was empty for their use. Hold on, Hyaktu said to the students as they made to move to the center again. He closed his eyes and held his hands out in front of him. A few seconds later, the 4 giant cauldrons from the magic channeling room appeared. Can we get some fire in the red cauldron? Hyaktu asked, looking at Midnight, Alchemar, and Scarlet. Alchemar hurried forward before the other fire magicians could move. The red cauldron was soon blazing, the other cauldrons already containing their own elements. For this test, you'll be doing group channeling and sharing the same grade, Hyaktu told the students.
There are 2 parts,
Khurshid continued.
The first part will be controlling the element in the cauldron. The second part will be creating your own element, then controlling it from there. You must control the element as a group. Since there are 2 of us, Hyaktu said, signaling himself and Khurshid, we'll have 2 groups go at a time. We'll do fire and water first. The fire and water magicians stepped up to the cauldrons, leaving the few earth and air students by the wall.
Now I won't be able to watch you test,
Ren said to Sorella, squeezing her hand. Sorella clenched her jaw. Why would you?
Because you'll probably send a rock flying into the ceiling again,
Ren teased. Are you ever going to drop that?
Nope,
Ren snorted lightly, then added,
I won't drop it because I'll keep it in the air with my magic. You can drop it, though.
Sorella huffed impatiently, but couldn't prevent the smile that formed on her lips. The girls were quiet for a moment, watching as the water magicians followed Frost's lead to circle the water around the room. Then Ren spoke.
We're going to the moonlight dance together, right?
Sorella stiffened and glanced down at her girlfriend.
Since we're dating, it only makes sense that we would,
Ren pointed out, her purple eyes shining. Sorella dropped her gaze. I don't know, Ren. I couldn't stand it last time. It was too noisy, too many people. I was kind of hoping you'd forget all about it. I sure did, with all that's been going on. She could feel Ren's disappointed gaze on her, but neither of them said anything more, and Hyaktu soon summoned the earth and air magicians forward. Sorella let go of Ren's hand as they went to their separate cauldrons. What if she hates me now? Sorella wondered, glancing over her shoulder at Ren. No, she wouldn't hate me for that, would she? Stop thinking about her and the dance and Mimeta. Just focus on the stupid test.
I have an idea for what we can do,
Raimugi said, interrupting her thoughts. What is it? Sorella huffed.
Let's combine the stones together to make one giant boulder,
Raimugi said. Ebony frowned. Is that possible? Rocks aren't exactly moldable.
We're in command, so we'll command the stone,
Raimugi said with a wink. Sorella shrugged, not particularly caring what they did. She lifted her wand in front of her, Raimugi and Ebony following her lead. Khurshid stood off to the side, his ears pricked and his hands raised slightly in front of him to sense what the students would be doing. Mold the rocks into one stone, Sorella ordered her magic. Raimugi and Ebony repeated her words, pointing their own wands at the stones in the green cauldron. There were about 20 rocks, which lifted in the air in front of them. But the stones clashed as they came together, unable to turn into one rock. Maybe if we break it down, Sorella thought. Turn these stones into sand, she commanded. The others quickly repeated her. After a few moments, the rocks began to break away, forming tiny pebbles that dropped back into the cauldron. Make the sand into one rock, Sorella said as the last stone crumbled away. The trio repeated these words in unison, the sand rising from the cauldron again. It clumped together, and after repeating their words plenty of times, it hardened into a rock.
That was well done,
Khurshid praised.
You'll receive 100%. It's difficult to create a new stone. Only the more advanced magicians can do that on their own. You may return to the side of the room.
The air magicians were already done, Hyaktu having given them a full pass for controlling an air slide. Khurshid then called the water and fire magicians forward again for the second part of the test. Sorella leaned her back against the wall to watch, though her thoughts drifted back to Ren and the dance. Maybe I should go with her. We are dating, and it'd be messed up if I didn't go. What if she decided to go with someone else? Jealousy flowed through her as she thought of Ren and Frost dancing together. I can't let that happen. She glanced around for Ren and saw her standing only meters away, speaking with C3 and Murneo. Sorella tapped Ren's shoulder.
Sorry, Sorella, but we're busy discussing what to do for the next part of the test,
Ren said, a bit stiffly.
We can talk after class, okay?
Sorella opened her mouth to reply, but C3 was quicker.
You'd better figure out what you are doing for your tests, too.
Fine, whatever, Sorella uttered in annoyance. She turned and walked over to Raimugi and Ebony as Khurshid gave the water magicians a full passing grade. Any ideas? Sorella asked bluntly.
We should do the same thing,
Raimugi said brightly. Why?
You know how we create our own rocks from fat and muscles and stuff?
Sorella nodded, still grossed out by the fact.
So it'll be squishy, right? If we keep it squishy, we can put it together before it hardens into a stone,
Raimugi pressed.
It might take less effort than making it from sand after all.
Sorella sighed. Whatever. The fire magicians returned to the side of the room, Hyaktu beckoning the rest of the students forward. This time, the teacher switched places, with Hyaktu watching the earth students instead. You may begin when you are ready, Hyaktu told them. Sorella nodded and pointed her wand at herself. Make earth from my body, she said simply, imagining a stone forming from herself. She could feel a strange sucking sensation as the magic left her body. A substance appeared from the end of her wand, as if it was going through the wood. Sweat formed on Sorella's brow, soon dripping down her cheeks. Creating earth magic was much more difficult than creating a different element, and the result was usually lame. Form a stone, Sorella said, as Raimugi and Ebony managed to create their own strange substances in front of them. All three blobs of earth moved towards each other. They molded before they could harden into a stone. Once whole, the rock dropped to the ground with a loud thud, none of the earth magicians able to keep it floating in the air any longer. Ebony collapsed to his knees, his entire face sweaty. Good work, Hyaktu said. You'll receive a 90% pass. Sorella wiped the sweat from her brow as she returned to the side wall. The air magicians were still working on their test, but before she could take a closer look at what they were doing, Hyaktu spoke to the waiting students. You may go to the potions classroom for your plants test, he said. Good luck. Sorella sighed and tucked her wand in her winter robe. She then trailed the other students into the freezing temperatures outside, snow and wind threatening to shove her back. She dug her heels into the ground as best as she could, nearly stumbling into the other students. Luckily, they didn't have to walk too far. Raimugi, who had reached the potions classroom first, held the door for the struggling students. The shrieking wind nearly shoved them over, but they continued to hold the door open like their life depended on it. Sorella hurried inside, almost forgetting what the potions classroom was like. Sweet and sour scents mixed together, overwhelming her like the storm outside. Where shall I sit? She wondered. She lingered by the window as Raimugi finally came in themselves, allowing the wind to slam the door shut. A few minutes later, Ren entered the room with C3 and Murneo. Sorella trailed Ren to her desk, taking the empty one beside it. As soon as the students were seated, the bell rang for the end of magic channeling. The second years only had to wait a minute longer for Fern to enter the room herself, carrying a box full of mirrors. Everyone take a mirror, Fern said briskly, setting the box down on a small desk at the front of the room. The test is already open. You may begin as soon as you sit. Sorella sighed and got to her feet, joining the line of students grabbing the mirrors. The final bell had run for the start of plants by the time she sat down again. I wonder how bad this test will be, she thought dully as she entered her name at the top. There were only 10 multiple-choice questions and 5 long answer responses. Sorella tried to make it through the multiple-choice section quickly to have more time for the essay questions, but the answers were tricking her. What healing properties does a clawflower have? Sorella read the third question again and again. Isn't it A, B, and C? Why isn't D all of the above? I could have sworn Miss Oakley said the clawflower can do all of these things. Sorella ended up choosing her best guess on each question. When it came to the written responses, she merely jotted down a few sentences of what she remembered from class. The only question she felt she had confidently answered was the one asking how to get petals off a clawflower. The bell rang and Sorella swiftly hit the submit button. She brought the mirror to Fern, then exited the classroom, glad she didn't have to do potions. A blizzard still whirled outside, but the wind seemed to calm down. Sorella was at least able to make it to the northern garden without issue. She crossed the garden in the hopes of getting shelter from the storm, but most of the plants didn't have leaves. Their brittle branches rattled together, shivering as much as her. After a few minutes of struggling through the snow, wind, and twigs, Sorella finally made it to the other side of the garden. She could barely make out the northwestern tower through the swirling white and gray. Forcing her frigid feet on until she was right beside the door to the Tai Chi studio, she opened it with difficulty and staggered inside. The studio wasn't much warmer, the lights shining dimly as they detected her movement. Sorella walked over to the tower door and tried the knob, but it was locked. She rapped her knuckles against the wood, hardly able to feel it. Come on, Zen, Sorella thought impatiently. Open the door already. But after several minutes of standing in the room, the lights turned off. Sorella walked around so they turned back on, then wondered where she should go. If Zen wasn't in the tower, where were they? Maybe I'll wait here for now. I don't feel like going back out there. She moved closer to the back window, which looked out on the forest, but she could see nothing beyond the whirling white. Not even the bushes a few feet from the window could be seen. I wonder how long this blizzard will last. Maybe it'll get worse and cancel the dance, Sorella thought eagerly. A moment later, the wind died down a bit, the snow no longer flying so haphazardly. Sorella could now see bushes as well as a few trees at the edge of the forest, and she could see something else in the patch of poisonous mushrooms, which had grown taller than the snow around them. She frowned and squinted, but the red figure was mostly concealed by trees. Her sharp eyes could only see that there was something there. Tilting her head to one side and stepping closer to the window, she pressed her hands against the frozen glass. What is that? An animal? No animal would be out in this storm, though. A spirit? Kaocat? She continued to stare at the shape, but it didn't move into the open. The wind picked up again, flapping the red thing about. It looks like clothing, Sorella realized. The red thing moved. She saw the person for a brief second before the snow began flying all over the place again, blocking the figure from sight. But there was no mistaking the red dress, the magenta hair. Mimita! Sorella stumbled back from the window, as if she'd been kicked in a sparring match. She kept her eyes on the glass as she staggered for the door, her heart thumping madly in her chest. But the woman luckily did not appear on the other side of the window again. Sorella opened the door and forced her feet back into the blizzard of the courtyard. Mimita is here! What do I do? Did she know I was watching? Does she know it's me? Panic carried Sorella quickly through the snowstorm, though the wind at her back helped too. She reached the southern building in mere minutes and opened the door to what she hoped to be the entrance hall or counseling office. It was the counseling office she had found, and she stumbled into the admin hall from there. Her feet brought her straight to the admin office at the end of the hall, though she had no idea if Hyaktu would be there. The door was already open, so Sorella stumbled inside. Hyaktu was seated at the desk in the center of the room, his legs up on the wooden surface as he held a mirror in front of him. He glanced up as Sorella entered, his fingers pausing in their tapping. Sorella, what are you doing here? Hyaktu asked in surprise. Sorella closed the door before approaching the desk, her body shivering even more than when she'd been outside. I saw Mimita, she stammered, hating how her voice betrayed the fear that flowed through her tense body. What? Hyaktu sprang to his feet and hopped on top of the desk, nearly dropping the mirror. Where? When? Just now, Sarala breathed. Outside the Tai Chi studio. She was in the forest by those mushrooms. Did she see you? Hyaktu asked. I don't know, she mumbled honestly. But it was her. I don't doubt you, Hyaktu said quietly. He tapped his foot on the desk and placed his free hand on his hip as he thought. I will put up more enchantments, but in this storm, I don't have much chance of finding her. But what is she doing here? Sarala whispered, clutching her shoulders tightly as she hugged herself. Hyaktu shook his head. I wish I had answers, Sarala. The rest of Triz Day passed in a daze. Sarala wasn't able to eat even when Ren tried to hand-feed her. She finally admitted to the twins that she had seen Mimita so she could be left alone, but the two pestered her nonstop, asking the same questions that were going through her head. Eventually, Sarala retired to her bedroom early, locking the door to keep Ren's concern out. She didn't go to the martial arts classes with the twins to watch them test for their purple sash and purple fringe. The week pressed on, Sarala glad that she hadn't caught sight of Mimita, at least not in the waking world. Mimita still tormented her in nightmares. Sarala was also avoiding windows as much as she could, and mostly remained in the tower or eating hall. She had stopped going to the martial arts studios, training in her room instead. Soon enough, Sarala had something else to worry about, the moonlight dance. Ren had never brought up the dance again, and Sarala never told Ren that she'd go. But it was clearly something on both girls' minds as the days went on, until the last Seder day of the semester had arrived. Sarala woke up to Zin's usual morning greeting and let out a deep sigh of annoyance. She kept her eyes firmly shut, trying to fall back asleep. But then she remembered what day it was and sat bolt upright. The dance! She gasped, her stomach churning. I wonder if I could fake being sick. Would that work? The image of Ren and Frost appeared in her mind again, and she glared out the window opposite her. No, I have to go with Ren. I have to do this. She forced herself to her feet and didn't bother to change from her warm pajamas, too tired to do so. She went to the door and dragged her feet down 2 floors, until she was outside Ren's room on the 3rd level. The door was partially open, and she could hear voices inside. Sarala crept a bit closer, ensuring that she and her shadow couldn't be seen. She pricked her ears, trying to catch the twins' words, not sure why she had entered eavesdropping mode. I'm not going to the dance, Zin was saying. It was pretty boring last year, and I don't like the whole partner thing. Plus, Mint's already got a partner, apparently. Oh, Ren replied in an odd voice. Do you actually like them like that, Zin? Zin snorted loudly. No! Sorry, I just thought since you two keep hanging out recently and you wanted to go to the dance together, you might be interested in them romantically, not I'm not into anyone, Zin stated flatly. I don't feel romantic attraction. Besides, I'm sex repulsed, you know that. I can't even stand seeing you and Sarala kiss. Hey! Ren yelped in a high voice, as Sarala blushed outside the door. Well, just because you're not interested in the physical side of the relationship, it goes way beyond not interested. Doesn't mean you can't have the romantic side and be with someone. Look, I ain't interested in Mint like that, Zin retorted. I just thought if I did go to the dance, it'd be with Mint, but they're clearly taken. Right. What? Zin's voice grew skeptical. Am I not allowed to go to the dance with my friend? That's what we did last year. Not that I even stayed with them anyway. Sarala could hear Ren take a deep breath, even from far away. Zin, I'm so sorry. I asked Mint to go to the dance with me. What? Zin and Sarala shrieked in unison. Realizing she had given herself away, Sarala slammed the door wide open and entered the purple-painted room. Ren and Zin sat on the rug in the center, their backs to the door. The twins looked up as Sarala approached, both appearing nervous as Ren blushed strongly. You're going to the dance with Mint? Sarala growled, her jaw clenching as she glared down at Ren. Just as friends, Sarala, Ren mumbled, her eyes wide. I thought we were going to the dance together, Sarala hissed. Considering we're dating. Ren got to her feet and crossed her arms over her chest.
Oh, look, that's the exact same thing I said, and you still made it quite clear you didn't want to go.
I didn't want to go because of the setting, not because I didn't want to go with you, Sorella grumbled. Why would he go with Mint?
Because you need a partner to attend,
Ren pointed out.
I want to go, which meant I had to find a different partner since my own girlfriend doesn't want to go.
Her snappish tone vanished as she added in a soft voice.
Sorella, this doesn't mean we're not dating. Mint is definitely just a friend. You know that, right?
Sorella glared at her for a long moment, then turned on her heel and stormed from the room. She stomped up the stairs and returned to the 5th floor, slamming and locking her door behind her. She began pacing, her thoughts a swirl of madness. How could she go with Mint? I don't care if they're going as friends. They're still going together when she's supposed to go with me. I never said I wasn't going to go, did I? I said I wasn't sure, but that wasn't my final answer, even if I don't want to. Ugh, why would Ren betray me like that? The image of Mimita returned to her mind, and her raging thoughts slowed down. You betrayed me too. This world is full of traitors, isn't it? I can't trust Ren, can I? I can't trust any of these people. Even Mr. Saihan is probably keeping secrets. She came to a stop by the window opposite her bed, which overlooked the snowy courtyard. There were only a few students outside, dressed in fuzzy winter robes and scarves. They were likely headed to the eating hall for breakfast before a line could form. I shouldn't be here, Sorella thought dully. I should leave. But then again, Mimita is outside the school, probably waiting for me to go out. She sighed heavily, watching as it began to snow lightly. I suppose I have to stay here for now. But if Ren is so determined to betray me like that, I'll betray her too. See how she likes being backstabbed. But who should I go with that annoy her the most?
C3?
Zin's surprised voice sounded from the family room.
What are you doing here?
Sorella sighed as silence followed Zin's words. She continued to check herself in the bathroom mirror, fixing a strap on the fancy dress she had taken from the theater.
Sorella!
Zin screamed.
You're going with C3?
She sighed again, figuring she'd look decent enough to show herself to the others. She pulled her hair back into a simple tail, then nodded at her image in the mirror. That looks good, Sorella observed. Ren will definitely be jealous. She exited the bathroom to find Zin on the other side of the door. They gaped at her for a moment, then repeated,
You're going with C3?
Yeah, Sorella huffed. As friends. Zin scowled.
You're not friends with him.
Are you? Sorella smirked. Am I? She questioned.
Well, I don't think you are, muttered Zin. Especially considering the two of you haven't gotten along even once this semester. Why would he agree to go with you?
Sorella ignored their question, though she had wondered that as well. Who knows why C3 would? I'm just glad he said yes. Is Ren still here? She asked, smoothing out her dress.
No, she left with Mint like 5 minutes ago,
Zin said. Oh.
You're trying to make her jealous, aren't you?
Zin chuckled, detecting the disappointment in her voice.
I don't think that's gonna work well.
Why not? Sorella growled, tossing her hair over one shoulder. Oh, whatever. The dance is about to start, isn't it? I took too long getting ready.
Well, I can see why, with how much makeup you put on,
Zin snorted. Sorella shoved past them wordlessly. She hurried down the stone steps to the family room. C3 was standing in the doorway awkwardly, dressed in a dark green suit that reached past his knees. As usual, his left sleeve was tucked into the golden ring at his elbow. He wore a bright green tie that clashed with his red hair, but went with his mismatched eyes well.
Sorella?
C3 asked, his eyebrows rising in surprise as he caught sight of her. Let's go, Sorella grumbled, walking briskly across the room.
Have fun!
Zin called after them. Sorella slammed the door behind her as she trailed C3 through the Tai Chi studio. They walked across the frigid courtyard, Sorella regretting that she had chosen a low-cut dress. She was shivering before they could see the line outside the theater.
Why would you dress for the summer when it's snowing out here?
C3 asked her. I'm not dressed for the summer, Sorala grumbled. Not entirely, anyway. She pointed to the tights she wore beneath the dress, which hardly did anything to keep her warm. Even the thick coats of makeup on her face didn't keep out the cold. C3 didn't say anything else as they approached the small line outside the theater. Several students turned to stare at Sorala, noting how she was not dressed for the season. She ran her fingers over the golden beads of the many necklaces bouncing against her skin, trying to ignore the students and act like she didn't care what they thought. But in truth, her heart was hammering away, threatening to jump out of her chest. The two soon reached the door, where Hyaktu and Fern were checking students for wands. Hyaktu greeted C3, but frowned at Sorala as if he didn't know who she was. Then his eyes shined in realization. Sorala, you're coming to the dance after all? He asked. Yes, she muttered, clenching her jaw. I thought you wouldn't be here since Ren's here with Mint, Hyaktu stated, looking confused. Sorala bit her tongue before she could shoot a sarcastic response at him. She pointed her hooked nose in the air and entered the theater, grabbing C3's hand and pulling him in. He stumbled along behind her, his cries of surprise interrupted by the loud music that started playing. She came to a stop a few paces from the door on the edge of the dance floor. Many of the students had already started to dance, their excited screams hardly audible over the blaring music. Sorala's heart seemed to beat in time to the vibrations, and she willed it to stop. What now? She wondered, glancing around. I don't see Ren. Ren's supposed to be here. The theater appeared the same as the previous year. There were several live trees around the room, grown last minute by Fern for the dance. They were decorated in silver garland that glowed brightly. Snowflakes danced around the room, mostly hanging out by the food tables pushed to one side, or otherwise on the stage. Khurshid and Wave were on the stage, Khurshid standing off to the side with his hands continuously moving in the air to detect what the students were doing around him. Wave, meanwhile, controlled the music from several mirrors and speakers.
Do you want to dance?
C3 practically shouted in Sorala's ear. Sorala backed away from him, shooting him a glare. You don't need to yell, she retorted, her own words drowned out from the music. C3 shrugged in response. He pointed to the dance floor, then to the food tables, clearly asking her what she wanted to do. But Sorala didn't know. She wanted to find Ren, to make her girlfriend jealous. To make her wish she came with me. Sorala scanned the crowd again, then her eyes found Mint. They were quite noticeable, not only by their large form, but also by their crazy dance moves. They were swinging their arms and legs all over the place, the other students giving them a wide berth. Except for Ren. Ren danced alongside them in just as crazy a fashion, probably to avoid Mint's flailing arms. She's so beautiful, Sorala thought, watching her girlfriend move gracefully. Ren was dressed in a purple leaf-patterned robe. She wore a collared shirt and dress pants underneath. As she moved about, Sorala also caught sight of a moon necklace sparkling in the dazzling lights. Why couldn't I come here with you? I would have danced with you this time, Sorala thought, her anxious heart now aching tremendously. Maybe it's not too late to make this up to her.
You want to dance?
C3 asked loudly, catching where Sorala was looking. Will that make her jealous if she sees me dancing with C3? Sorala wondered. I guess it could work. She nodded to C3, not bothering to use words as the music continued to blast. Nobody paid attention to the couple as they walked forward, not even to gawk at Sorala's strange fashion. Then again, the room was heating up quickly that Sorala was quite glad she hadn't worn something heavier, pushing through sweaty bodies to get closer to Ren. Sorala came to a stop a few feet from Ren and Mint as the first song ended. A new one started up, more upbeat and energetic than the previous song. How do I dance? But before she could try anything with the awkward C3, Ren caught sight of them. She smiled at Sorala, waved to C3, then frowned and glanced back at Sorala. She didn't recognize me, realized Sorala. Maybe I need to do this makeup thing more often.
Sorala?
Ren gasped loudly, her voice somehow audible over the pounding music. Hi, Sorala grunted, knowing she'd be impossible to hear.
You look great,
Ren said, her smile faltering a bit. It's working. She regrets not coming with me. She glanced down at her dress, which was bright purple on top and dark purple on the bottom. She had chosen the color, knowing Ren loved it. The golden necklaces contrasted the dress well, but they also held moon charms, another thing that would catch Ren's eyes. Even the tights were pastel purple patterned in yellow specks like stars. But Ren wasn't gazing much at what Sorala was wearing. She was staring at Sorala's face, at the makeup that she had asked to borrow from Raimugi. Sorala hadn't any idea how to apply makeup, and she certainly hadn't known how to do it artistically, yet she had done her best. She had drawn purple wings around her eyes, much like what Raimugi did from time to time. On her cheeks, she had golden stars, though some looked more like blobs than stars. She wore dark purple lipstick, which went well with her dress. But the most remarkable thing was the crescent moon she had drawn on her forehead, which was pale purple in color.
Wow, you did a great job with your makeup,
Ren commented, blushing. Thanks, Sorala uttered, again knowing that Ren would be unable to hear her. The two stood awkwardly for a moment, then Mint came over, their green eyes excited as they peered down at their friends.
Hi, Sorala! I barely recognize you! I love your makeup! Can you show me how to do that?
Sorala smiled lightly, but made no other response. She eyed Mint's wrist, noting that they were wearing the green bracelet, signaling they were non-binary. Sorala then glanced at their outfit, which wasn't as odd as the previous years. They were dressed in a collared shirt with leaves across it to match Ren's robe. They wore a long, dark green skirt beneath, which hung above their winter boots.
Oh, do you two want to dance together?
Mint asked Ren, grinning from ear to ear. Before Ren could reply, though, Sorala shook her head and faced C3 instead. She was glad she turned away, knowing that Ren was probably looking quite hurt. Dance, Sorala growled to C3.
Okay.
C3 practically mouthed, sweat glistening on his forehead. Sorala reached her hands forward and grabbed C3's wrist, trying to push the anxiety away. The two then moved about stiffly, stumbling over each other's feet as they tried to dance quickly to the music. Sorala realized how foolish they looked, and she soon stopped. At that point, Ren was dancing alongside Mint again, her back to Sorala. Is she jealous yet? Sorala wondered. Can I dance with her now, or leave? But Sorala had no idea what Ren might be feeling, as she couldn't see the other girl's face. Sorala sighed and returned to dancing with C3 for the next song, trying to imitate how other couples were moving. Yet most students were dancing in groups, jumping about with their fists in the air. That was certainly the case with Raimugi and Murneo, the two prancing like deer in an attempt to make the bad-tempered Frost bound around with them. We look so stupid, Sorala thought, coming to another stop midway through the song.
I'm getting lightheaded.
C3 said loudly, leaning in so Sorala could hear him.
I'm going to eat.
I'll go too, Sorala muttered, not caring if he heard her or not. She trailed C3 off the dance floor into the tables opposite the stage. There were many platters of food, some of them magic-filled, if she remembered C3's words correctly from the previous year. Magic-filled food wasn't too common, as most magic was stored in the bitter or inedible parts of plants. Sorella reached for some crackling crackers, which were square-shaped. She popped one in her mouth and chewed, the cracker exploding before she could fully swallow it. After only 3 crackers, Sorella found that she was no longer hungry, despite not eating the whole day. Her anxiety was getting the better of her, sweat dripping down her forearms.
Do you want to dance?
C3 asked her awkwardly. No, Sorella grumbled, clenching her jaw. Dancing is definitely not my thing. I'll have to find some other way to make Ren jealous. If I see her again tonight, I might as well leave and give up. But before she could finish that thought, she felt a tap on her shoulder and turned around. Ren and Mint were standing right there, both smiling. Did she not care that I danced with C3 over her?
Hi,
Ren said, waving.
Are you having fun?
Sorella sighed. No, I hate this stupid dance. I hate that you still don't care about me coming with C3. That's when Sorella realized why Ren wasn't bothered. You know I'm only into girls. Why didn't I bring a girl with me instead? I could have asked, I don't know, Scarlet, Cayenne, Midnight. I'm so stupid. Besides, it's not like C3 and I are friends anyway. No wonder you don't care.
Sorella, are you okay?
Ren asked, her smile fading a bit.
Do you want to go outside?
Sorella gazed at Ren for a long moment, then turned back to C3, who stood only feet away. Sorella grabbed his wrist as he made to pick up another piece of snowy shortbread and pulled him in close. She then leaned down and kissed him. The music stopped. The room seemed to fall still. Sorella kept her eyes firmly shut. Is everyone staring? She wondered, a nauseous feeling in the pit of her stomach. Why did everything stop? Yet the song had simply ended, and students were asking Wave to play specific songs. A new one started, and the room moved again as the teenagers surged closer to the stage. Sorella finally broke away from C3, having no idea how long she had kissed him for, and unaware that he hadn't kissed her in return. She opened her eyes, time seeming to slow down as she turned her gaze to Ren. Are you jealous now? Ren had her hands over her mouth. Her purple eyes were wide behind her glasses, glossy with tears. She stared at Sorella for a long moment, then swiveled and ran away.
How could you do that, Sorella?
Mint shrieked, tears sliding down their cheeks like waterfalls.
That was so evil!
Several students turned to look, but luckily Sorella was no longer kissing C3. Sorella crossed her arms over her chest, becoming aware that her entire body was now plastered in sweat. She felt sticky, gross. Sorella didn't bother to look at C3 as she walked briskly through the crowd, shoving students out of her way. What is wrong with me? Why did I do that? I didn't make Ren jealous at all, did I? I just broke her heart. I'm so stupid. Sorella soon reached the door, which Fern stood next to. Fern raised an eyebrow at Sorella as she approached.
She just went out,
Fern told her simply, holding open the door for her. Sorella blushed, glad the makeup concealed it. She walked swiftly through, the door closing behind her as soon as she was out. The music became muffled, and it was almost easy to forget the dance was happening at all. The courtyard was as cold as before, but it seemed to be more silent. Light snowflakes drifted about, covering the rigid branches nearby. Sorella could see small footsteps in the snow, illuminated by the lamps against the northern wall. They led straight to the garden, and she knew, instinctively, that they belonged to Ren. Sorella's heart ached. I'm such an idiot. What's wrong with me? I'm sorry, Ren. I took that way too far. She forced her feet forward, feeling more anxious than ever before in her life. The world seemed to sway around her as she became dizzy, but she persisted to the garden. The lamplight was unable to penetrate the thicket of dark plants, leaving Sorella to find her own way. Her stomach churned unpleasantly at the thought, a lump forming in her throat. But she wasn't entirely alone. She could hear a soft sound off to her left up ahead. Knowing it was Ren, Sorella moved more quickly. The sooner she could reach the girl, the better. She burst into a small clearing, which contained a single bench. Ren was sitting on the bench, her arms held tightly around her. Her hair rustled gently in the light breeze. Her breath came out as ragged puffs of fog on the air. Even when you're crying, you're so pretty, Sorella thought, her whole body aching at what she had done. Sorella sighed and walked forward. Ren? Ren continued to cry, her face pointed down. Her glasses sat on the bench beside her, so she could rub at her eyes more easily. Sorella stood a few feet away, not knowing what to do. In the end, she moved to sit on the bench beside Ren. I'm so sorry, Sorella mumbled, starting to shiver as the cold attached to her sweaty body. Ren didn't respond, but scooted away from Sorella. I don't know why I did that, Sorella said, staring down at her hands on her lap. I mean, I was trying to make you jealous, but you didn't seem to care. The only response she received was a sniffle. Sorella sighed. It's not my fault you weren't jealous of C3. I was getting desperate, so I kissed him.
I'm still not jealous of him,
Ren growled, glaring at Sorella.
Even if he actually kissed you back, I wouldn't be jealous, because I know you're only into girls.
I could have realized I'm actually bi or pan, Sorella grumbled in annoyance. People can change their identities, you know. Ren's eyes flashed in concern, and she swiftly turned away again. But I'm not, Sorella swiftly added. I only like girls. I don't honestly think that'll change for me.
If you wanted to make me jealous so badly, why not bring another girl? Ren hissed harshly. I'd be more jealous if you brought a girl, since that'd be a more serious threat.
Threat? Sorella scoffed.
Well, duh,
Ren snapped, glowering at Sorella again.
You're into girls, not boys or non-binary people, so I wouldn't see C3 as a threat. But another girl would be a threat. I'd be jealous sooner, and then you would have one without needing to kiss the other girl.
Sorella sighed. I guess that's true. I just asked the first person I could think of who'd annoy you, and the only other person who didn't have a partner.
C3 doesn't annoy me as much as he annoys you or Zin.
Sorella rubbed her forehead, forgetting about her makeup. She remained quiet, having no idea what to say. The two girls lapsed into silence for several minutes. Sorella continued to shiver as the air grew more chilly, wishing she could cuddle with Ren. But as she tried to shift closer to the other girl again, Ren got to her feet.
See you later,
she muttered darkly. Ren then stormed off, forgetting her glasses on the bench as she tumbled through the plants. Sorella sighed and grabbed the glasses, getting to her feet as well. She trailed in Ren's footsteps, not bothering to catch up to her. She reached the Tai Chi studio as she heard the door to the tower slam shut. She entered the room and made her way to the tower door, then decided against going in. I should leave, Sorella thought dully. Ren doesn't want to see me later. She doesn't want to see me again. And Zin will probably hate me on her behalf. I'm not wanted here, not at all. Why did I have to mess things up? Sorella took a shaky breath and moved closer to the window overlooking the forest. She placed her free hand on the glass, her other hand still clutching Ren's glasses. Mimita appeared in her mind's eye once more. Did I mess things up with you too? She wondered. Is that why you dumped me on the side of the road? Is it because I ruined everything? Sorella closed her eyes and shook her head numbly. I have to leave. I have to get out of here. I don't belong here. I never did, and I never will. She opened her eyes, then let out a terrified scream. A woman was on the other side of the window, staring right at Sorella. Mimita! Sorella gasped, backing up and stumbling over her feet. Mimita smiled in at Sorella, her red eyes glinting. She then turned and ran away, her dress billowing behind her. Sorella staggered to her feet and hurried to the window again, but the blacksmith was gone. Where'd she go? Why was she here? How did she recognize me when nobody else could tonight? Sorella heard a door open behind her. The lack of freezing air at her back told her that it was the tower door, not the one leading to the courtyard. Sorella? Zin's voice sounded from the doorway. Did you scream? She was shivering uncontrollably, clutching herself tightly, willing herself to stop shaking. She closed her eyes and sunk to the mat. Sorella? Zin was now at her shoulder. But she couldn't answer. Ren, something's wrong with Sorella, Zin called loudly. No, don't make her come. She hates me. I need to get out of here. But Mimita's outside. She's waiting for me. Another wave of panic overtook her. Ren! Zin's voice took on a more worried tone, which didn't help. Calm down, calm down, calm down, Sorella thought. But it didn't matter how many times she repeated this to herself. She just felt more hysteric than before.
Sorella, what's going on?
Ren's voice broke through her thoughts, causing her heart to flutter.
Look, we can forget about the dance thing if you want. I'm not jealous, and C3 obviously doesn't like you back, so we're all good, okay? We're still girlfriends. Please stop freaking out.
But Ren's words barely brought any relief to Sorella. Even as Ren crouched beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder, Sorella couldn't stop herself from shaking.
Zin, get Fern, or Dad,
Ren called. Zin made no response, but Sorella could make out their footsteps running away. As soon as the door slammed, Ren leaned in closer, wrapping her arms tightly around Sorella.
I'm sorry about the dance, okay? I still love you, Sorella,
she whispered. No, I don't deserve to be loved. Leave me alone. Sorella had no idea how much time had passed. She couldn't shove Ren off her, so she just continued to shiver in her arms. Tears were streaking down her cheeks at this point, definitely ruining her makeup, but she didn't care one bit. She wished the panic would come to an end. Eventually, the door opened, and she could hear multiple sets of footsteps. Ren broke away from her, Sorella wishing she'd stay. "She's suffering a panic attack," Fern's brisk voice came. "Can you help her?" Ren asked in a faint voice. "Of course I can," Fern snapped. "I'll give her a sleeping potion." "No!" Sorella shouted, her eyes opening at last. She stared up at Fern, who was gazing down at her with a frown. Ren stood at Fern's shoulder, looking odd without her glasses as she squinted at Sorella through her angular eyes. Zin lingered off to the side, almost entirely out of Sorella's sight. "The sleeping potion will calm me down most effective. Mimita. I saw Mimita," Sorella choked. "Outside, staring at me, right on the other side of the glass." Ren gasped and whirled around, as if expecting Mimita to still be there. Fern's frown grew deeper, and she closed her eyes for a moment. She then opened her eyes and crouched next to Sorella, pulling a small vial from her robe pocket. "Drink this now," Fern said. "You'll be asleep in no time." "But—" "I told Hyuk to, and we will look into this," Fern promised. "Now drink. You'll feel better. We won't let her near you." Fern practically shoved the vial into Sorella's free hand. Sorella hesitated a moment, then opened it and drank the freezing potion. She shivered at the sour taste as she handed the empty container back. Then she knew no more as she slipped into a dreamless sleep, free from Mimita at last.